shelter and fortress, Emmanuel. When all else fails, your truth will stand. We're safe forever in your hand. Storms may rise, but they will not last. Your word is my anchor, my firm steadfast. The fire may burn, but I will not fear, for the refuge of Zion is always near. Lift up your eyes, behold the King, the Lord of hosts is our covering from age to age. His promise remains, the refuge who saves. Forever he reigns. God is our refuge, our present help, shelter and fortress, Emmanuel. When all else fails, your truth will stand. We're safe forever, ever in your hands. God is our refuge, our present help, shelter and fortress, Emmanuel. When all else fails, your truth will stand. We're safe forever in your hands. The dragon whispers through the night, veiling truth in borrowed light. Nations stumble, eyes grown dim, but we will not bow down to him. We are deceived no more. We hear the lion roar, with the word as our sword. We are deceived no more. False kings rise on shifting sand, but Christ alone holds command. Though the world may mock his name, the remnant stands unashamed. Eyes awake, hearts alive, in the storm we will survive. Truth has broken every chain, Jesus Christ forever reigns. God is our refuge, our present help, shelter and fortress, Emmanuel. When all else fails, your truth will stand. We're safe forever in your hands. We are deceived
All right, welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome. Good morning, Brother Phil, and good afternoon, Miss Chiro. Let's see who else is with us. Let's see. We have Pops with us. He has rejoined the membership. Thank you for that, Brother Pops. He's my brother from next door. He's over in Alabama. We have Miss Anna as well in the house. Good morning. Good welcome, everyone. Welcome. Let's see, we have a few people hanging out with us. Not everyone is in chat, and not everyone is used to me being live so early. Here, let me turn this light down. Just a touch. There we go. Just a touch. Brother Justin, good to see you. He said, anyone interested? I did little season write-up that can be found under my profile post, as well over 200 little season verses organized in a nice way. Was written for Kick, but he ignored it. Yeah, I'm sure he did ignore it. That. Good to see you, Brother Chakma. Good to see you. Here, let me fix my mic. Might be too loud. Okay, all right, there we go. Ought to be right around there. Shalom. Good to see you guys. Brother Justin. Yeah, I haven't really reached out to Brother Sean over there at Kingdom in Context. That's Kick. That's who you're talking about. I haven't actually reached out to him. I wasn't really, just overly thrilled with the debunking episode that I did of him with him, or did about his debunking video, and so I kind of want to readdress that and handle that differently. But there's some other videos that he did that I really wanted to go over that I didn't get to go over that evening. But that was a very long breakdown. But the issue isn't necessarily Sean from Kingdom and Context. The issue is the overall misunderstanding of time. The misunderstanding of time, not knowing when in time we are, what the real timeline is, what our calendars are, why our calendars are the way they are, why we use a 12-month system with various days within each month, and why do we lean on all these different ideologies or theologies of time when in truth, all the answers are like right in front of us. I mean, they're given to us. See, to find Justin's profile, let's see if I can help you guys out with that. Boom, boom. This will make it easier, Brother Phil. That should be a link to Justin's profile there. Let's see if I did that right. Pull this up over here. Okay, so he has a Dropbox, a link with a Dropbox. So I assume you subscribe to him there, and then you can go to his stuff that he's got. Miss Santa says, "Oh, hello, brothers and sisters." Well, welcome, Miss Santa. Welcome. Good to have you guys. Miss Chiro says, "Thank you. I was trying to find it." You're welcome. Absolutely, you're welcome. So I've been working on quite a bit in my downtime from employment. As you guys noticed, I've been working on a history series, and the first 3 episodes, I kind of presented them in a kind of like a reflection video. We're the goal with the history of us in the first 3 episodes that I produced there is to let you guys see how I'm breaking it down. I'm breaking this thing down into individual parts. So each part combined, all the parts combined create the whole episode. Well, the way I've got this thing broken down is that there's several episodes and there's 3 seasons, and each season covers 3 ages of time. in the first season, the goal with the history of us is to cover the history of time from Adam all the way to Abraham and Jacob, Esau, and Isaac. When the true divide after the flood really began, and it really started taking shape. Not really began, but started taking shape. And then the second season, my plan is to show the development of historical inaccuracies throughout time, from the time of Jacob and Esau, the first Israelites, when they first came up about, all the way to the time of King David and King Solomon, where they get carried away into Babylon. And then in the final season, what we'll do is we'll wrap back up with catching up with them in Babylon, the people of that time in the Bible, the Israelites that we read about, and how they go from that back to their promised land into the time of Jesus. And then we get into the time of the little season where we're at today. So the history of us is a long process that I'm working on. However, the first 3 episodes are all parts combined into each episode. And so that's taken me some time to figure out how to edit those videos and put them all together and actually craft them and make them. And as it turns out, it takes me about 60, 70 hours straight, almost 80 hours per video. And so once I start back to my new career or my new job, I won't necessarily have the time to produce the full episodes as you've been seeing them. So what'll happen is every week I will produce a part. So you'll get episode 4, part 1, and then you'll get episode 4, part 2, until that entire episode is completed. And then you'll have all of them to put together, so you guys could, see each part as it develops, and then kind of like, or you could just kind of wait till they're all done, which it'll be about 7 or 8 weeks between each episode. But that being said, that's the history of us. That's the YouTube series that I'm working on when it comes to all that. Outside of that, I've also been working on trying to compile all of my research and data so that okay, all right. I was out of context with the chat there. But what I'm pointing out, what I was about to say is that I'm going through all my data and my notes, and I'm trying to compile a formal book, or even just like a really in-depth PDF. It doesn't necessarily have to be a book, but what I'm trying to do is I want you guys to have like a step-by-step guide on how to break this timeline down and to figure out when in time we are. Like, what is our actual timeline? There are so many different theories of thought behind it. You have people that think that the earth is millions of years old. There are people that think the earth is billions of years old. And then there are people that think the earth is only 6,000 years old. And the questions that I ask when I think about those things, or those thoughts, are why? Hey, why do you think that? Why do you think the earth is millions of years old? Why do you think it is billions of years old? And why would you think it's 6,000 years old? Like, what is the concept behind the establishment of time when it comes to all of this? Isn't our God supposed to be outside of time? Our God isn't supposed to experience existence in the same way that we are as the created. Our God is the creator, and we are the created, and therefore we experience time within the limitations of our creation. How long have we existed? How long have we been here? That's how we would measure time. However, if you've always been here and you always were here, and you always are here, and you always will be here, time is irrelevant to you. Time doesn't matter. And that's an understanding that comes from Scripture. That's an understanding that comes from study. It's not an understanding that you just, it is this way. Of course, without reading Scripture and without studying, we have to rely on the teachings that other people provide for us, right? Well, in that, is it so important that you know or don't know what all that other person knows? Well, in my experience with it, it's that it doesn't necessarily matter that you've studied or read as much as I have or anyone else necessarily, because ultimately the truth is on our hearts, and you know it when you hear it. When you hear the truth, it registers in your mind and in your brain, and you go, oh, well, that makes sense. And that works. And so I've often wondered, well, why do we apply that same reasoning and logic to other fallacies of thought, such as like why the whole thought of the earth being millions of years old? The earth is millions of years old. How does that make sense? Well, it only makes sense if you're applying the measure of that or that logic to something else that also makes sense to you, such as the development of the earth or the development of the system, the solar system, or space, or the universe, or any of it. And so the only way for the earth to make sense that it's millions of years old is that you also agree that there was a big bang. You also agree that there was necessarily no God, and that everything spawned out of random chaos. And in that, where do you get that understanding? Where would you get that understanding? Like, where would you come up with that? Like, where would you get those ideas to even have those thoughts in your mind? And the reality is, we get that from education. We get it from media. We get it from the History Channel documentaries that they produce. Those real elegant ones, the ones kind of like what I'm trying to do, with the touch, a little bit of music, a little bit of immersive stuff to kind of make you feel like you're there in a way. That entertainment factor. The difference being that history, or as being taught to you, doesn't have to be boring. It can be an exciting or entertaining story as told to you. It doesn't have to be boring. It can be somewhat entertaining. However, within the facets of that entertainment, the histories or the education you're being given or shown should be accurate, or should be founded in truth. And the reality is, most of anything we get is not founded in truth. The whole understanding that we all desire a kinship, so to speak, a kinship with Christ. We all want peace. We all want the best version of life for ourselves. Even the worst of us still want the best version of life that we could have for ourselves. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, like especially when it comes to my channel here and Truth Unfiltered. What would Jesus do? If Jesus and the saints were alive today, they wouldn't be worried about YouTube videos. They wouldn't be worried about losing all the things we have that we're afraid to lose. But in that same respect, if the shoes were on the other feet, and we were living among Jesus and the saints, knowing that time would end soon, and that Satan would take back over, and that the world would go back to this awful way again, in that same respect, you wouldn't want to lose what you had then either. The whole understanding or misunderstanding of engraven images, it's where all of this comes from. It's where all of the histories and the deceptions of time come from. It's these engraven images, these paintings, pictures, maps, books, writings, everything that we use to determine reality for ourselves. It's engraven images. And are they good or are they bad? Well, it depends. It depends because, for example, like what I'm going over or about to go over with you guys, what's my agenda? You know, what does the Rev seek to get out of this by exposing anything or talking about any of this? What is my agenda? Well, my agenda is what I think should be the agenda of most people when they're dealing with scripture or the truth. That the truth is what's important, despite anything else, despite the emotions that come along with it, despite the negative pushback and the all the nuances of naysayers and critics and the skeptics. How do you deal with those people? Do you even deal with them? Are you supposed to? Should we even be worried about that? Well, the reality is time is an illusion. Time is an illusion created by us to, if for some reason, I guess what it does is it establishes this inner dialogue in our mind that we're finite, or that we're kind of, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Limited, I guess, or we don't have an eternity. We have a fixed point. We're a fixed point in time, and we exist from point A to point B. And on a timeline, point A to B is just simply the length of your life within the grand scheme of existence. Well, we're not necessarily supposed to be worried about all that, because in truth, if our faith is right and if our understanding is accurate, time is supposed to be irrelevant to us as well. Just because you were born and don't remember or don't have any awareness of what you were before you were born, if you were even an existed being before you were born, from the moment you were born until the moment you're no longer walking on the earth, time is still supposed to be irrelevant to you. But yet we find that without accepting time and without acknowledging it, it just leads us down these different paths of confusion. Who are we? Where did we come from? I seen this AI video. Have you seen these AI Disney films where they take like real issues and kind of make it seem like they're it's like a trailer for a Pixar animation movie, and it'll be like one about race or transgender or something crazy like that. Well, I was watching one of those AI type videos, and it was explaining, they were talking about the Caucasus Mountains and how basically the black people in America are going to round up all the white people and send them back to the Caucasus, over the Caucasus Mountains. And it was kind of very distasteful in the scheme of racism. However, it was kind of funny to me because of how silly that whole notion is, that white people came from a singular group of people called the Caucasians or the Caucasus. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's like the whole idea or concept that white people come from Europe or that black people even come from Africa. It's a silly concept that people come from any particular part of the earth, when yes, it does tell us in Genesis 1, or not necessarily Genesis 1, but in Genesis 6, when he creates man, that he formed him from the dust of the earth. Actually, it's not 6. Why am I so ahead of myself? Why did I say 6? I'm thinking of when they fell. All right. Anyway, so it was on the 6th day. That's what I was thinking about when I was saying there. All right. Let's see. Hopefully you guys can see that. If I can make that a little bit bigger. There. That's a little bit bigger. All right. So the point is, I wanted to show you guys this. So I have this timeline set up, kind of put together, and I know you guys you've probably seen this before, especially those of you that have been following me around. Let me see. Where is my button? Boom, boom. If you guys are new here, I went over this months ago, earlier on in the year, and what I have here in front of you is a timeline that I put together. And this is just a simple breakdown of time from year 1 being the year Adam left the garden, all the way to King David, and then I kind of started going through each of the little lines, and then I kind of gave up on that because there's really no point in doing all that, and there's a reason for that, and I'll get to that in a moment. But what I've done here is I've got this timeline established of dates, and you have year 1 being the year Adam left the garden. Now, the interesting thing is that Adam wasn't like a child or a baby. He wasn't like 1 day old when he left the garden. It's not like he was formed today, as like in the same sense of time as a whole day is for you and me, and then he just left out of that garden. It's really difficult to say exactly how long Adam was in the garden, but my estimation of best guess and estimation of time with it is that Adam was in the Garden of Eden, pure and innocent, a light being in the world, for roughly 70 years, give or take. And it could have been 1,000 years, it could have been 800 years, it could have been a million years. We don't really absolutely know. There's no way to know for certain. But I do have reasons to believe that he was potentially in the Garden of Eden for about 70 years. So he was the equivalent of a 70-year-old man, but not like our 70-year-old men. Our 70-year-old men would be like on the comparison of like a 700 or 800-year-old man compared to what Adam would have been at his 70 would have been like a 25-year-old man to one of us. Is all I'm trying to say to that. But it doesn't matter. That's not really a relevant point. What's relevant is that after he left out of the garden, it says that he was 130 years old when he begot Seth. And so what that's telling you is it's giving you the first marker or the first anchor point of time for you today to be able to go, well, they're lying to us about all kinds of stuff. So let's see what the truth is. Let's go through this thing and figure it out. And now you break out your Bible and you open it up to Genesis, and you get over here to the genealogies of Adam, and then you realize It's telling you how long these people lived. It's telling you how long they were here. It tells you how old they were when they were born. And a lot of times it'll even tell you how old they were when they died. And in this case, it tells us that Adam was 930 years old. Now, there's something I want you to notice with these numbers. These numbers right here are all pretty much the same. Now, ignoring this number 600, that's for Noah, but Noah's number continues on. His number actually continues on. His number is actually right here. So it just so happens before the flood, he was 600 years old. So what? I got this number wrong. This is supposed to be 16. But anyways, let me go ahead and fix that. All right. The point is that these numbers right here, if you'll notice, well, actually, y'all aren't even looking at what I'm looking at. Here we go. The complete timeline of mankind from creation to the crown. Adam to King David was 33 generations. It's around 3,170 years after the creation of after Adam. I'm saying creation, but it's really after Adam. It's the year 1 after the first year when Adam left the garden. Year 1. The first man's born year 1. He was 1 year old or 0. However you want to look at it. Point is, he lived 930 years. And all the people before the flood lived relatively close to 1,000. Not quite, though, but close. Was it Methuselah was the oldest, right? Yeah, Methuselah was the oldest at 969 years old. I find it interesting how people, especially in churches, will preach and talk about these people as if they had normal lives like you and me. But the truth is they didn't. They didn't have normal lives like you and me. I mean, consider the state of the world we're in 2025, and then go back just simply 100 years to 1925, and consider over the last 100 years how far we've come and how much we've developed. Hey, y'all get back in here. Get back in here. Yo, chill out. Chill out. Callie, get over here. Quit. It's not just a random noise outside. It's just random noise. They heard a noise. They want to protect me. The point is that I was trying to make is that we talk about these people and we don't really. It's really difficult for a lot of us to put ourselves in their shoes. Look at America just over the last 100 years. Look at any well-established country over the last 100 years. We've gone from hardly no people, it seemed like, to billions of people on the earth just in 100 years. And so what this is not telling you is that these people are not just the only people in the world. Like, it's not just Adam and his wife and Seth, and then Cain and his wife somewhere else. It's not just Enos and Canaan. It's not just Mahalalel and just Jared. It's not just Enoch. It's not just Methuselah. What you have are generations. In each of these names, Adam, Seth, Enos, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, all represent generations. They're representations of an entire generation of people. So the first generation of people would have been Adam and Eve. And then the second generation would have been Seth. And not just Seth, all by himself. You have Seth, and then you have everyone else that's born of that time that Seth is alive. Adam and Eve had other children. Seth and his wife, they had multiple children. They didn't have just Enos, and then that's it. They had Enos, who was their first child, who began the first of that generation. And then they had another child, another kids. They had more children, more sons and daughters. All of these people had sons and daughters. And the same is true for Cain's line. While Cain is having a child, that child becomes the first of that generation. And then that child, they have children, and they spread and they grow. For 1,656 years before the flood, all this is taking place. Like, these people are experiencing hundreds and hundreds of years of time, whereas you and me, we're lucky to see 100 years. Any one of us today is a very fortunate and blessed individual to see 100 years old. And yet they're experiencing our lifetimes 10 times almost. In other words, it's very silly to start your assumption with Scripture that we're more advanced and we're smarter and we're beyond what they're doing. What? Oh, one second. Mom, I don't know what you're doing. Blessings, Brother Barry. Blessings. Good to see you. Brother Jason, prayers up for you, brother. I seen what you got going on. I see you're in chat, though. Welcome, brother. Welcome, Brother Jason. Miss Dolly had braces. She says, what's up, fam? Good to see you. Good to see you. Miss Deborah, or Deborah, however you want to say it. I don't know how you pronounce it, but I like Deborah. Of course, you might pronounce it Deborah. Miss Deborah, or Deborah Dodson, said the Mark of Cain was being turned into a ginger. Yeah. Well, yeah. So, okay. Kinda, in a way. I think there is something to that. Let's see. El Reina 02. Good to see you. Good to see you. All right, I think I caught up with everyone there in chat. Brother Barry, he says, blessings, Rev family, coming in late. No, you're not late. You're just in time. God's timing is perfect, Brother Barry. God's timing is perfect. Yeah, so the issue with the gender stuff, when it comes to a lot of this timeline, bloodline stuff, it's really hard to separate modern understanding of race from it all. I do believe that the line of Cain, that those people were a white people, but not like you and me as white people, not like us. They're very different. We're not really a white people. We're just a really light shade of wheat is what we are mostly. There was but I believe that line was very, very pale, like very pale in complexion. They were very fair-skinned people, and that they were that way for 7 generations, and then that 8th generation is when that ended. Of course, that the mark of Cain or that curse was to last 7 generations anyhow, but regardless of the mark of Cain, that entire bloodline through the seed of Cain is erased. Like they get destroyed or wiped off the face of the earth. God kills them in the flood. It removes that entire lineage. Well, after the flood, the issue is that you'll have people come into the world that very similarly look or have very fair skin or even looks very similar to those people, but it doesn't mean you are those people. But that comes from the genetic traits that mothers carry. It's also a reason. It's also a reason behind the Japhite line and how it got all mixed up and confused and everything. But ultimately, what we have today is a duality of all people. So it really wouldn't matter what line you come from. There's a split in everybody's line, as far as I can tell. But that's a different topic, a different day. One that I'm going to go back over and readdress when we go back through the Bloodline series again, when we pick back up on that. But as far as that goes, there were yes, that's true, Dolly. I got some stuff on that too. But yes, so the wives, you would think that Noah would have wanted his sons to marry people from within their own line. But the truth is, it didn't matter what line you were from. Everybody was corrupted. All the hearts of all men at that time were corrupted. And Noah's sons weren't free from that corruption either. It's just that Noah was, and the only reason for them even being saved is because they were Noah's sons. Had they not been Noah's sons, they wouldn't have made it either. But yeah, so what we'll have are genetic markers or traits that make people look similar, or they'll have similar attributes to the line of Cain. Ultimately, though, the source of Cain starts with the seed of Cain, not the seed of Seth. So what we have is the seed of Seth now that has a duality, a split. And then in that line of Seth, you'll have like originally when it's like this, it's pure, right? It's all one. But then when it splits, what makes it impure? Well, nothing really. You just have two different people, like they're brothers. Like if you have twins, those twins divide, and those twins carry the same DNA, right? They're the same. They're still technically the same, but they have two separate consciousness. Now they're going their own different way. But that consciousness is what we call spirit. And so they're now of two different spirits. And that's essentially what ends up happening when you get Esau and Jacob come into the scene. I think before Esau, if you could go back in time, you would have 3 bloodlines, A, B, and O, if you wanted to keep it titled as that. And then after Enos, you get a split. You now get a positive and negative. And so you might have an A blood, but you might be an A positive or an A negative. And in that positive negative, all that's gonna do is show. It should show where your source was, or your seed source. And unfortunately, what happens is people love taking the Bible out of context, and they'll read stuff where it says God hated Esau. Well, God may have hated Esau, but that doesn't change the fact that Esau was still Abraham's grandson. He was still the son of Isaac, which means he was still raised in the house of Eber, which means he was still a Hebrew, and he still would have Hebrew ways about himself. Whether God hated Esau or not doesn't change the fact that Esau had children, and those children didn't ask to be born of Esau, though they may have been hated as well, and they may not have been good kids or good people. Didn't change anything. Your fate is your fate. You do suffer at the sins of your father, and that I believe that is true. But each one of us is as an opportunity to create a new foundation within ourselves, to break those generational curses, so to speak. And so what ends up happening is I feel like with it all is that the whole bloodline stuff becomes no longer relevant once we get to Jesus. Basically, didn't matter who you are or where you come from or what family or tribe or lineage. There are no more royal bloodlines once Jesus comes into the scene. He removes all of that. And so that's another reason why the world is the way it is today. But welcome. Good to see you, Miss Gina, says everyone in chat. And Brother Rev, uplifting blessings through Jesus Christ, Yahusha. Much love, everybody's. All right, Tartaria and Biblical Research Reloaded. Hi, Rev. Sorry I'm checking in late. No, not late at all. What did two Namos? All right, the seed of Cain. Oh yeah, so yeah, and right, and that's the thing. If you just go pick up your regular Bible, it's not going to tell you who Naaman's line is necessarily, not accurately. You have to really look into other sources. It's interesting because I was using this AI generator, image generator, and I was taking passages from the scripture to try to generate accurate images of these people. And it gave me what I thought they were, where I kind of feel like Noah was basically like a white albino fella, and then you had Naamah, who was a darker skinned lady. And she was darker only because of the generation that she come in. She was an 8th generation. She was not of the 7 that were cursed. And so while she no longer carries the mark, she still carries those DNA or those genetic markers, those traits. It's kind of like, I'm not trying to pick on the Asians, okay, when I say this. But I'm clearly not Asian, right? And if I married an Asian lady and we had a child, our child would definitely look Asian, or there'd be no doubt that one of that child's parents were Asian. Well, if my half Asian child then marries a white woman, they have a mixed baby, that child is probably going to look still have some Asian in them. By the time that child gets to their child, we're now entering the 3rd and 4th generation. Once we get to that 4th generation, that child won't look like an Asian anymore on the surface. It'll be an internal thing. It'll be in the structure of the bones or the anatomy. The internal structure might still have the qualities or the natural aspects of my Asian wife, for example, but the surface, that 4th generation, will look white, but slightly different. And then it's why it's but all I'm saying is that it takes about 4 generations or 3 to complete a line, and then a lineage, and then a 4th generation to reestablish or reaffirm what you are. For example, if you had 3 if you started out as a black fella and you married a white lady, and that kid married a white lady and kept on doing that, kept marrying white people, your 4th generation would be white with nothing. You wouldn't look black at all. And then what would happen is you'd go to school and you'd be told that you're white and that you're a slave owner and that you're an oppressor and that you're a colonizer and you're from Europe, when in reality you wouldn't exist if it hadn't have been for somebody who's not from Europe and is the opposite of what a European would look like. And all I'm saying is that that's what we see after the flood is what leads to all of that. It's like what we see after the flood initially is why you'll see multiple races of people seeming to have control over the same regions of land. But you can't have two different groups of people having the same control over the same land. So what we're having to do is rely on these historians to tell us when in time these people were in charge of these lands. And then they come up with these wild numbers like 10,000, 11,000, 20,000 years ago. It wasn't that long ago when the whole world was under the authority of one man, and that was Nimrod. He was the first one that come up after the flood. But here's what's wild about these numbers. You see, they lived almost 1,000 years old before the flood. But the first three generations, Arphax, Selah, and Eber. Why is Hebrew so important? Because Eber was the last of that. He represented the last generation of the sons of Shem and the sons of Ham, the sons of Japheth. He represented the last generation before the divide of men. Because right after Eber, you get Peleg, which in Hebrew is what that's talking about. It's what that means. It's the dividing of nations. It's when the nations were divided. That's why they called him Peleg. It's a Hebrew. It's what it means in Hebrew. But that's neither here nor there. The important thing that I'm trying to get you to take away from this is to look at these dates, these numbers. The first three generations post-flood only lived around 450 years. 438, 433, 464. Then, after those generations, when the first divide happens, you get another three generations, Peleg, Ru, and Serug. And from Peleg, Ru, and Serug, we're now down to 239 to 230, so about 230 years. So their lifespans are now being cut in half again. They got cut in half here. Now they're getting cut in half here. Then the next three generations are what's going to lead us, or the next few generations is what's going to lead us to what we're at today, about where the average healthy person is going to live to be about 120 years old. Yeah, some people might go a little further than that, and some people may not even get close to that. Most people probably won't even get close. But the point is, it's three generations. But by the time we get to Terah, right here, this is what this is important for the divide, is that you can see Terah is the 19th generation from Adam, and from Noah, he is the 9th generation from Noah. Then when Abraham is born as the 20th from Adam, the 10th from Noah, Nimrod is also in the world. But Nimrod was born 110 years after the flood, give or take. So right after the flood, you have Shem, and Ham has a son named Cush. Cush, here, let's just pull it up over here in Genesis. Boom, 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 boom. All right, so let's get back over here. This is all the line of Seth. Where are we at? Where is all our people at? Because we're after the flood, right? Here we go. This is what I was looking for. Okay, so right after the flood, Ham has a son named Cush. Cush is born roughly 2 to 3 years right after the flood. it tells us in the Bible that he was an old man. He was in his old age when he had Nimrod. But we also find out later on some more dates and stuff that let us know how old Nimrod was whenever he took power. Nimrod was 40 years old when he took power over the earth. Well, what I mean by taking power is that right after the flood, these families right here, these generations were who were on the earth. You had the generations of Arphax, Selah, and Eber. They were still alive, by the way. They're still alive even whenever Nimrod comes in. Shem and Japheth and Ham, they're all still alive. In fact, these three people will end up living all the way into Abraham's time and Jacob and Esau's time. They'll live, they're all down here. So what I'm trying to point out here is that Japheth, Ham, and Shem, they're the first generation after the flood. But then you got about 12, 13, 14 generations that come about during their lifetime, even after the flood. These first people would have been the first gods. Now, you wouldn't have seen Arphax or Selah or Eber as a god because they were from the house of Shem. They were the house of Shem. But from the line of Ham, you would have Cush, Mizraim, Phut, Canaan. Those four people would have been like the first emperors or the first kings of the earth. But they wouldn't have been like kings like you and me. People would have looked at them as gods. They would have saw them as gods. They were big and tall and strong as gods. Same with Japheth. You had Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Tyrus. Interesting thing is this name right here, Javan, and we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, and then these other names are interesting. From Javan, we get Kittim. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. So, what's interesting is that Javan, he has a son named Kittim, and Kittim ends up a woman, or I don't know who it was. I don't know her name because it doesn't ever tell us that. But my understanding is that Esau, one of the Edomites, married into the line of Kittim, which is where we get Alexander the Great, because Philip of Macedonia come from Chittim, and so Chittim's the same place, and that's where this is your tie-in with Esau and Alexander the Great, and how it's also how Abraham's seed gets mixed into into the line of the Gentiles or the line of Japheth. And it's also how he becomes father of all nations. But it's it's kind of like God's way of using our enemies to fulfill his work. But once you get to Seba and the line of Ham, after Cush, you'll get Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Rama, and Septicha, and the sons of Rama were Sheba and Dedan. Seba is a third generation, and Dedan is a fourth, or Sheba and Dedan are fourth generations. Now, they're a fourth generation, but Nimrod is a third generation, because he is the son of Cush. Nimrod is the son of Cush, who is the son of Ham, a third generation. So Nimrod was born in the same generation as Eber. So comes from the Hebrew generation, the generation of the Hebrew people. That was when he came into the world. Well, when we consider time, at the time that he was, when Abraham comes into the scene. Okay, yeah, let's make sure I'm looking at this right. So yeah, Abraham lives 175 years. He was born in the year 1948, but not yours and my 1948. The 1948 is 1,948 years after Adam left the garden, after the first year. After the first year, then we have 1,948 years later, and then we have the death of Abraham, which is in 2123. You know what's interesting about this? That's a conspiracy. I'm not even going to bring in those conspiracies. But anyhow, so 1948, that's where Abraham comes in. But Nimrod is still alive. In fact, let's see if I have it on down here. Yeah. So we're in the estimation. The reason why we can use estimations with Ham and Japheth is because the way that they establish generations, the establishment of their generations is very different than the establishment of the Hebrew, or the way we're taught through the Bible. The point is that we can measure time through one line. We don't need to measure time through three independent lines. So it wouldn't change anything necessarily, whether these numbers were 100% or off by a year or two. Even if we're off by a few years on these people, it's not it's not just going to shut everything down. Callie, chill. Stop doing that. Chill out. If you'll quit licking the couch, that won't happen. Stop. And they're bored. They get bored. They start licking the couch. I don't know why she does that, but it makes her want to gag. Anyways, the point is, Nimrod was about 182 years old by the time Abraham was born. And then Abraham, right after he's born, he gets taken away to go live with Noah. And the interesting thing is, Noah should be dead, but he's not. He's still alive. He's after the flood. When Abraham comes into the world, Noah is still alive, and Noah lives. Noah lives until when did he? 2006. So so essentially in 1948, Abraham goes to live with Noah, and then 50 years later, Abraham leaves the house of Noah to go back home to Terah's house, his father's house. 8 years later is when Noah dies. Well, that's also when, after Noah dies, that's also when Abraham decides to go back home, basically, and then finds the giants have settled where he's supposed to be going. But the point is, Abraham when he came into the world, Nimrod had already been around a couple hundred years. So you have to understand, if you or me were in charge of the world today, what would the world look like 200 years later with you still being alive and in charge? That's how the world was for them. Like there was no, in other words, there was a long period of time, of decades of time, where there was no understanding of the world other than the way Nimrod's system was established. What's important to note, when Nimrod comes into the world, all right, Nimrod, yep. When Nimrod comes into the world, he builds these 4 cities: Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. These are more than just cities. This is a network of systems, of governing systems. That's what this is. This is a system that is being built. Now, Nimrod heralds over the world from Babel, but he's just as much in charge of all these other places. Yet he'll have people in charge of those other places in his stead. But he builds these, and that's what leads to Nineveh and all these other places. Because in those days and in those times, there was no trying to necessarily please God so much as there was just simply trying to please Nimrod. You want to be on Nimrod's team, because just like today with Israel and our government, and how all of our Congress members are dual citizens, which is something that should be, every one of them should be on trial for treason right now. By the way, every person in our government today is a dual citizen of Israel, which means it's impossible for any of them to have our best interest first. It's impossible. You can't serve 2 masters. You can only serve one. But the point is that I'm trying to make with that, or the connection here, is that the system that they were living in those days, just like today, if I wanted to be the next Joe Rogan podcast, it would come down to a matter of me saying the right things on camera, getting the attention of the right person's ear, for them to proposition me in the same way they did that Charlie Kirk fella. We will support you and give you millions upon millions of dollars as long as you allow us to control the narrative. And essentially, if I didn't care about the truth, and I didn't care about Christ, and I didn't care about y'all, then I would just simply, okay, sure, let me sign this contract, because, it's just money, and I'm not really physically doing anything. It's still your choice to listen to me or not. And I could kind of go like that. Well, it's the same concept. In those days, dealing with Nimrod and his people, you would have been in that same mindset of, you're not going to buck the system. So in other words, you're not going to go out and talking about, we don't need to be worshiping false gods. We need to be worshiping the God, because you'd be the crazy person. Just like today, talking about the little season, we're the crazy person. Well, so what you'll see here is a breakdown of time. And within the breakdown of time, there's another thing that people don't notice. Let me see if I can get down here and find it. Where are we? This is the other part. Yeah. See, on this wild timeline, I've got this big, thick red line. That's to let you know that's when the flood happens. And this line, 2006, that's when Noah dies. Point is, you got these generations, as they're breaking up, what I believe is happening is that Noah and his sons, on average, were about 15 to 18 feet tall. And then the next 3 generations, the 3 generations of up to Eber, were about 12 to 15 feet tall. And then when you get to Peleg, Reu, and Serug, people are about average 8 to 10 feet tall. But by the time we get to Nahor, Terah, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the average height of a regular person was about 6 feet tall. Now, understanding that is going to come into play here in just a little while once we get to certain people. But for now, understanding that really doesn't matter so much as it just helps you can actually see when this happens. Before the flood, people were living on average 900 years. After the flood, the first few generations, they only lived half of that. And then they lived a quarter of that. And then after the quarter time, when you get to Nahor, Terah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, then by that time, the average height is about 6 foot tall. Why does that matter? Why is that important? Well, it's important because it's going to help us understand Jacob's brother and what happened in the deal or the issue with the Japhethites. Like, why doesn't the Bible really talk about the line of Japheth too much? Well, there's a reason for that. There's a lot of reasons many reasons for a lot of things, obviously, but there's reasons for that, and it's never for you and me. Like, those reasons that they don't tell us stuff, it's not to hurt you, but it's because some of this stuff it's not as important. However, today in the little season, while we're dealing with so many lines of deception, it's important to be able to go back through and trace it to kind of erase the false histories we've been taught or been taught about. Anyways, moving on though, yeah. So on average, the first few people, especially Shem and Japheth and their sons, Arphaxad, Selah, and Eber, they were really big people, really big people. That's important because, remember, Nimrod was born in the same generation as Eber, a third generation. So remember, Abraham is a normal sized man. He's just on average 6 foot tall, around 6 foot tall. He might be 6'1", 6'2", 5'11", more likely 6'1" or 6'2", something like that. But Nimrod would have been almost 13, 14, 15 feet tall, natural birth. Like nothing crazy done. He's not an anomaly. He's not a giant. He's just a third generation person from Shem or from Ham. And because he's a third generation, he's going to be much bigger. And as we saw, the way I got it listed here, let's see if I pull this back up. Oh, I'm moving too fast. What I'm saying is that if the average height is about 6 to 8 feet tall, about 6 foot tall, he was around 12 to 15 feet tall. I have this suspicion that he was really 13 feet tall, which kind of aligns with Gilgamesh being 13 feet tall, which is very interesting. A whole nother interesting thing all on its own, right? Now, once we get through Abraham and Nimrod, though, we get these two sons, Jacob and Esau. Let's see. Let's get to them. What chapter was it? Boom, 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 boom. We're almost there. It's on down, ain't it? It's on a little ways on. Here we are. Several chapters later, you're going to get to Abraham and Isaac. When you get to Isaac, Isaac's going to have a son, or two sons actually, Esau and Jacob. And Esau is important. He's an important character, even though it does say that God hated him. It's through him that Abraham's seed is spread all throughout the world. It's not just through him. Jacob does the same thing. Jacob has the he has the same problems when it comes to marriage and intercourse that Esau has, basically, and goes over. I say, what's the name of the video that goes after that chart? Does it have a timeline in it? Are you talking about the timeline series video that lady had done? I think that's what you're talking about. Father Abba and Jesus Christ. Let's see, I missed something. Let me go scroll back up here. What you guys are talking about? Sharper than iron, I believe anything is possible. Yep. What's the name of that video that goes after that chart? Oh, this? I think she's talking about this chart. All right. All right. So anyhow, before I get too far off into Esau and Jacob, let's just continue on with these numbers and these dates here. You know, all right. So what we've gotten when we get to Abraham, this isn't in a video, not yet. Anyways, it's gonna be. I'm gonna bring this into the history of us in the next couple episodes. But yeah, this isn't in a video yet, not this chart. Anyways, but Abraham, once we get to him, we're at the 20th generation. Now, how to figure out when in time we are? Like, how do we use these numbers to figure that out? Well, when we go through the Bible, let me pull this. There we go. This chart is what I was talking about, by the way. But this right here is in my Revelation series. I don't remember. I think it's like episode 3 or 4, something like that. I'm gonna go over this a lot more here in just a minute. But for now, we're right here at 20 generations after Adam. Why that's important? We know that's going to be important later on, because when we get to Matthew chapter 1, it's going to tell us why that's important. Why all these numbers are important. It's like how to use them. It's going to tell us. Jesus is going to give us the answers to the question on how to use these numbers to figure out your timeline. All right. So after this, once we go through Genesis and you make it through all of these books right here, you get to chapter 26, 27, all the way to chapter 50, and then you move into the Exodus. The book of Exodus is talking about this time period here, from Jacob unto somewhere around Boaz, I want to say. I think it's Boaz. It may be Salmon, but I think it's Boaz, somewhere around that. What I'm trying to point out here is that the book of Exodus, in chronological order of time, you should be where they're getting into the wandering. And then in the wandering, who's running the show? Moses, Aaron, and Joshua, until Moses and Aaron dies, and then Joshua is left in charge. Well, then Joshua, once he's finally in charge and doesn't have to deal with Moses and Aaron anymore, he can finally get his people into the promised land. And I say finally. If they would have listened to Joshua to begin with, they would have never went into their wandering for 40 years. Now, the wandering for 40 years is where one of the divisions of belief in generations comes from. Another thing, I can't remember exactly which one it is. I think it's Psalms 129, something like that. I think it's Psalms 129 where King David is talking about a generation being his generation was 70 years, and then we have the wandering for 40 years. And so, well, what is a generation? It says that no one in that generation would see the promised land. And so for 40 years they wandered. And then after 40 years, that entire generation died. But that doesn't mean every person was dead now. It just means that the people that were of that generation wouldn't see it. But that just means that there was only 40 years left of that generation for that generation to be completed. A generation it marks the average of a lifespan for an average group of people, or the whole sum of the whole average of all people of that time. To say that a generation is limited to 40 or 70 years is silly, because a lot of people live beyond those dates, those years. And so how do you deal with it? Like, how do you finish a timeline if you don't have concrete numbers? If you can't say it's exactly 2,330 years, how do we know that any of this is true, right? Well, it's simple. Once we get through the Exodus, and then you get into Leviticus and Numbers, from there, we're now in the land of Canaan, or the new promised land. It's also where we get King David, who happens to be the 33rd generation from Adam. For those of you that like those Mason numbers, there you go. There's one of your Mason numbers. 33rd degree, 33rd generation. David was a 33rd generation. And from him, this is where it gets interesting. So, see, we can add up all these birthdays and all of these deaths, right? Birth, death, and the years lived. We can add them all up, and we can follow them through Scripture, through Genesis, through the Exodus, all the way to David. And then when we get to King David, if your math is mathing correctly, you're not mathing wrong, David, by the time you get to him, we should be 2,570 years. Now, why is that even important? It's important because of books that are not in the Bible. When Adam left the garden, there's was it the Cave of Treasures, or the first book of Adam? Yes, first book of Adam and Eve, where it talks about the angel. The angel gives them a prophetic warning. It says, don't worry about today or tomorrow. God is not going to destroy the world until 5.5 days have passed. Well, until after 5.5 days. Well, if we're considering what David says about time in those days, 1,000 years equals a day. So what you're seeing here is 2.5 days. All right. To get from here to the tribulation, in order for the tribulation to be correct, we have to at least cover another 3,000 years from David to Christ. We have to cover a span of time. Got my numbers wrong over here on my little timeline thing. What I want to show you is that from David, when we go from David to the cross, we should cover 3,000 years. But how do we know though? Like, how do we know that our numbers are going to be even going to be correct? Well, once you get to David, this is why my little timeline that you're looking at right here, that's why all these numbers are all messed up. Like, these numbers are all wrong. Like, I kind of got these wrong, some of these. But there's a reason why this part here gets confusing. Like, why these names are actually difficult, like, to follow along with. It's because of this right here. Well, it's solved with this right here, not because it's solved with this right here. If you go through the numbers, and then you go through the book of Judges, and then you go through the book of Kings, you can still trace like these individual years, like each years. But what happens is, once you get to Numbers and into Kings, it's no longer this dude was born 100 years after this dude's father, and then this dude was born 85 years after this dude's father. Like, there is no more keeping up with time in that way. It's now being moved. Once we get to David, it's now about generations. And it took me a while to figure that out. But the answer is very simple. It's in chapter 1 of Matthew, the very first book of the New Testament. The book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac, and Isaac begot Jacob, and Jacob begot Judas and his brethren. And Judas begot Phares, and Zara, and Thamar, and Phares begot Ezram, and Ezram begot Aram. Why is that even important? Why all these names? Why are they listing all these names? Because so all the generations from Abraham to David, from Abraham in 1948 unto David in 2570 are 14 generations. Okay, so now when you take these numbers right here, let's see. Yep. So when you take these numbers right here, what is that? Make sure I'm doing this right. Equals that. I'm missing something. Where's my thing at? I've got to pull it. I'm trying to get these. I'm going to pull the calculator up here in a moment, but there's something I've got to put in. I got to plug in for this to make sense. Where's my phone? There it is. Pulled my little calculator up here. All right. Trying to. I left one of my notes out. Dang. Can't see if I can find it in here. I might have it in here. Let me pull this up over here. Between that's what I thought. That's not right. Something's not. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Right. 5,500 years. Okay. All right. Sorry, I don't know where my note is. I left. I definitely have misplaced something. I'm gonna find it here. Give me 1 second. I'm not gonna be happy until I do find it. Come on now. Open up. I have a whole page that I have left out of my little presentation here, and it showed the exact numbers. I don't want to have to do the math again. It's aggravating. Ugh. All right, let's see. Where is this? All right. All right, that's good. That's good. I'm almost there. I don't need that line. That's the wrong one. I do need that. Just bear with me 1 second. I left something out of my little presentation here. Don't know exactly where I put it. Where did I get these numbers? Let me find it. 1948, 182. I figured that. We got that. We're past that. It's crazy when you. Okay, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, so this math is wrong here. I think that's where we're at. Okay. So let me go back up to here. From David, I might have to go back and check my numbers here. But we're trying. All right. So the goal is to figure out how long a generation is. Is it 40 years or 70 years? That's what I'm trying to show you. And it's not either. It's neither one of them. It's not 40 years and it's not 70. But there's a reason. How did I get that? All right, I know that equals that. All right, that's it. That's where we're at. That's where my numbers are off. $31, 29. So 31, maybe 31, 29 minus 25, 70. Okay. Well, we're about halfway, about done there. So 55, 65. Okay. So what I got on paper and what I had in my head is a difference of 500 years, which may not make a difference. We'll see. I guess but I am doing this right. Where did I get that from? Okay, I guess it really doesn't matter, does it? I guess my math is. I'm gonna have to go back through here and do this again. Oh man, I left out a whole thing and I don't know where it's at. Yeah. Okay. Well, the point is that if you can do this math real simple, even using this chart. It's not gonna be exactly correct here, but we're gonna be pretty close. So basically what you would do is you would just take 2570, that's the year that I've gotten in here for David being born. But that's not, it's a 400-year difference between this and my old timeline. That's why my numbers are different. Anyways, 2570 from the year 1948 where Abraham come in, right? So minus 1948, like this. Here, we'll just do it like this. So 2570 minus 1948 gives you 622 years between Abraham and David. 622 years. That tells us in Matthew chapter 1, right here, that there's 14 generations from David to Abraham. So from that, you would just simply, you would end up getting 622, and you would divide that by 14. And here, this is at 44, but these numbers, these numbers are wrong that I'm looking at right here. The actual numbers, it's 2909. It's not 2570. I don't know where I put that in there. The reason why that's important, 2909. Let's go back. You have a 30-year difference is all it is. It's not a huge difference, but 961 divided by 14. 68. So it's a difference between, so it's about 70 years a generation. The way I had it figured, though, was right at 84 years. So once you get into like numbers, the book of Numbers, I have a whole a whole thing. It's probably 3 pages on it, and I can't find it. But once we get into numbers, the numbers that we're looking at here end up being more accurate, right? What this is, I know where I got this from, was from the estimations that you get. When you're dealing with the estimations, you get, it's like this was based off of the 40-year generation. It still gets us to 5.5 days, but it's within 500 years. So whether your generations are 40 years or 80 years, you're still within a 500-year range, which seems like a long time, right? Like for us, 500 years is a long time because none of us are going to live over 150 years old. But over the span of about 5,000 or 6,000 years, 500 years is nothing. Is all that is all I'm trying to point out with that. The point is that if I'm right on the numbers, let me pull this up so you can see it again. If I am right, the way I had it figured up was that a generation was 84 years. And so from Abraham to David should have been 1176. The reason that's important is because from David until the carrying away into Babylon, it's another 14 generations. And then from that, we get another 14 generations to Christ. So that's another 28 generations, right? So those 28 generations, you would simply add this twice. $35.28 is where it should be, or around that. Is around the year 3528. Around 3,528 years from Christ. All right, yeah. So the reason why that's important, let's pull this back up. Oh, there it is. I did pull that. I did do it right. These generations to Christ, it should be 5.5 days. Well, if you take 3528 and then you add 2570 plus 2570, it brings us to 6,000 to 6,000. The issue is that once you add that from that 6,000, you would end up adding another 1,000. And it brings us to the year 7,000. The thing is, though, I think we're actually a little further along than this. I think we're closer to that year. But that's only if I'm right on these numbers there. The point is that from David to Christ, it should be no more than 14 generations. And then you would take the sum of those 14 generations. The sum of these generations, add them together, divide it by 14, and that should give you, depending on what anchor point you're using, you're either going to have, your generations are either going to be 40 years or they're going to be 70 years. But the funny thing is that if you're using the 40-year generation, then your anchor point is going to reflect that. So you're still going to end up at the same point in time, right around 6,000 to 6,500 years. It was my understanding that once we get to Jesus, once we get from David to Jesus, those additional generations that they spent, that time that they spent, it's over 2,000 years. They're literally in Babylon for nearly 2,000 years. They're living in Babylon. The Israelites would end up living in Babylon a longer period of time than even you and I have existed since the supposed Jesus, which they say has been 2,000 years. Well, it's not like they were having too many resets during that time. They had a lot of wars and a lot of problems, but from that we end up getting to, it's either going to be 5.5 days at tribulation, or we're going to be at 6 days at tribulation. So you're either at 5.5 days, depending on the way you want to extend out generations. Now, the reason, I think mainly the main reason I stick to the 70 to 80 year generations is because when you use the 70, 80 year generations of a generation, that time, you end up right at 5,500 years whenever the tribulation begins. And then if you go off of the 40 years, well, then you're at 6,000 years when the tribulation begins. So it doesn't really matter as far as scripturally or prophetically. None of those discrepancies take away from the prophecy of truth, that after Jesus would come, he would do all the things that he said he was going to do. He would be born, he would be born from a virgin, that he would perform a lot of miracles. He would die, resurrect, come back to life, and then come back and establish judgment on earth, the judgment of men. And he did all those things. But the thing is, like, if he didn't, then if he didn't do the things he says he did, I don't know. I mean, I just don't know how to imagine that. I don't know how to imagine a reality where Jesus didn't do what he said he was going to do. A lot of people do, though. They like to imagine Jesus never coming back, never doing the things he said he was going to do. I can't believe I left out about 3 pages of my timeline stuff here. Messed that whole ending up, but at least I got us to David, right? I got us to the anchor point. an anchor point in it. At least now you can at least find these numbers. All these numbers are in the Bible, by the way. They're like in the Bible. Once you get over to Numbers, in past Moses, there's okay, yes, all that's Moses, Numbers. Let's get on the Kings. Actually, let's just go back before David. Once you get into Samuel and all that, it starts talking about how long these people were in charge. Like Saul was in charge for this long. And then David. And then after David, it becomes Solomon. And then from Solomon, it's no longer time isn't measured by how long people lived necessarily as individuals, so much as it's how long an entire generation would live. But what they'll do, a lot of people will try to follow through each one of these books, Kings, and they'll measure out, like right here it says, now in the 18th year of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, reigned Abijam over Judah. Well, what this is telling you is not that he was 18 years old necessarily. It's saying that he had been king for 18 years at this point. The king, now in the 18th year of King Jeroboam. Yeah, that's right. And then like right here, it says 3 years he reigned in Jerusalem. Well, you can kind of start adding these little numbers, these 3 years here, these 18 years here. You can kind of go through your Bible and through these timelines and do all that. And then all these numbers are just going to get exponential. They're just going to keep growing and growing and growing and get more and more and more and more and more and more and more, and until you'll end up with 100 people all within a 10-year period or a 20-year period or something like that. To keep you from having to squish all those names in here, Jesus just makes it simple. Tells us that there are 14 generations from Abraham to David, and that is the key. That is the key. Now, my math may be wrong. I may not be a mathematician, I may not be perfect in adding up all these numbers, but you might be. You might be perfect. You might have a better math brain than I do. And you might be able to go through this book starting at Genesis chapter 10. You might be able to start here and count all these numbers and all these birth dates. You might be able to go through that and figure out how long these people lived. Shem lived after he begot Arphaxad 500 years, and begot sons and daughters. And Arphaxad lived 530 years, and then he begot Salah. And Arphaxad lived after he begot Salah 403 years. 530 years, 530 years plus 403. It's 900. That don't seem right, does it? 5 and 30 years. Oh, 35 years. So he was 35 years when he begot Salah, and then here he's 403 years after he begot, when he died. So he was 403 years old, right? Is that what I put on here? Is that what I got? 433? Yeah, 433 years old. So he was 433 years old. Yeah, see, I think the years were I think that there's just simply 365 days every year, and that every month there's 12 months with 4 weeks per month. I mean, yeah, 4 months. So each week, 52 weeks at 4 weeks per month at 13 months. And then there's like it's technically there's an extra day because there is one day between each year. So that's kind of where they get that leap year from. That leap year thing. But the point is that it's simple. Once we get to David, we know that we can multiply those numbers to get the next numbers that we're going to need to get us to the time that Jesus is in. And when we get to that time that Jesus is in, we should be right around plus 9240. Yeah. So we should be right around 5.5 to 6,000 years. So 5,500 years to 6,000 years. So once we get, now we know that, what do we do with the 1,000 years that are missing? Well, we just add it in. And what that does is it brings us to nearly 7,000 years. Well, when God said that his spirit wouldn't rest with man forever, or is it? Where is it? Second month, 17th day, same day. Day where all the fountains of the great deep broken up. All right. Oh yeah, this is something else I wanted to point out. Jason Jack loves Pangea. I don't know why. But no one in the Christian community has ever told you about Pangea. All right, to be clear on that. No one in the Christian community anywhere has ever taught or about it's like Pangea doesn't come from that, right? Pangea comes from tectonic plates. It comes from a ball earth. It has nothing to do with the reality of our world. Now I'm going to show you what I mean. Why I'm saying that. Okay. Actually, let me do this. Do this. God created the heavens and the earth, and he set the earth is on a foundation. The earth itself, what we stand on, is set on a foundation. It's fixed. It cannot be moved. The earth we stand on, the land we stand on, cannot be moved. It doesn't slide. It doesn't shift around on top of anything. That does not happen. Our earth is fixed. It's immovable. When God destroyed the earth with the flood, he doesn't move the lands. They don't shift around. When the tribulation happened and the islands were moved from their positions and their places, the land does not move. That's not what it's saying, and that's not what it's talking about. Our ground, our earth is fixed and immovable. It cannot be moved. But it can be broken. The earth can be broken, but it cannot be moved. This is a 2D flat image from the side, right? That's what I'm trying to show you right here. There's your dome, okay? Flat. It's set upon pillars. The foundations are set upon pillars. It cannot be moved. So what's he talking about what are we talking about when we're talking about Pangea? This is what he's trying to talk about. He's trying to say, because he's saying that, and I understand it, because I love Jason Jack for this, but it's a good thought, but that comes from schools, and we have to ignore the schools. All of these lands that you see that are broken up, that are not together, didn't just shift around. They're not floating around. They're not moving. They've been here for all time. These positions of these places, these continents, these land masses that we have access to and don't have access to, all of this, they've been where they're at for all time. So what are we talking about then? What are we talking about when they say that the lands are moved, or that this happens? Like, what are we talking about, Pangea? Well, this is what we're talking about. I'm going to try to draw this as simple as I can. Let me pull this away, put that over there. So, to kind of give you an understanding of how this worked, if this is the land, these are the pillars that the earth is set upon. This is the dome. You will have a mountain in the middle. And then you would have other lands, right? You've seen this. Y'all have seen this picture before. Y'all have seen this map before. This is the Hebrew stuff. Here, let me change this for you. Okay. So you've seen this. What they're showing you here. Then you'll have your moon, your sun, and then you'll have your moon, right? All right. Let's forget that. What happens is this: when the lands broke up after the flood, am I no sound? What? No sound? Oh, Miss Trish, you must have me muted. Everybody else says they can hear me. I might address that, Brother Barry. But what I'm trying to show you here is, like, with the fountains of the deep, all right, we're going to put these down here. In fact, let's just make them blue. So we got the fountains of the deep. The fountains of the deep. What happens is, when the fountains of the deep explode, the lands then break up. This land here, we're going to break that up right there. Let's go back to purple. So this is going to break up. And now this piece of land is separated from this piece of land. The same over here. This will be separated from this. And now what you're going to have is this, where all of this blue used to be land. All this blue, all this blue, all that blue, all this blue. Everywhere you're seeing blue, it used to be land, right? But before the flood, there aren't any maps that show this, by the way. You can't just have to kind of go off of what they tell us in these old books. But essentially what you have is you had the earth, and then you have four rivers. You had four land masses. And in the middle, you had Rupus Nigra, or the Tree of Life. This was the world before the flood. This, what you're looking at in this image, is the same thing you're looking at when you're looking at the moon map or any other map of the world. It's the same image. Like this is the moon map, right? This is a photograph of the moon transposed. Now you have green earth and green and blue water. What you're seeing is the earth today. What you're seeing here is the earth before the flood. After the flood, this earth, because of the fountains of the deep being exploding up, you end up with the current state of the world. Now, the islands are not fixed. They're not a fixed land, but an island is not the original earth itself either. Let me go back. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so if you had, if this represents the earth, and then you raise a part of it, and then you raise another part of it, what's going to happen is this. Now what you have is, this is still down here. That's the main layer of the earth. This is what's sitting on foundations. It can't be moved. Well, what is an island? Where do we get an island from? Well, all of that land. If all of this was land at one time, with just four rivers running through it, and then the fountains of the deep shoot up, the land is going up too with the water. And just like the water, the land is going to come down just like the water has to come down. And then what ends up happening is that you end up something like this. This little island out here. But this island, in fact, let me draw this different. All right. What I'm trying to tell you is that if you have an island out here, it's like this. That island is right there today, but it could be moved. It could end up, well, it's not going to be bigger necessarily, but now it's over here. How does this island move from there to here? How does it move? Like what's it doing? It's because this island is not just a big piece of the earth. This island, I know how this is going to sound. I know how crazy this is. I know how crazy this sounds. But if you had a dude that was really big, and you and me are if you and me are really little and that dude is really big, this dude is now dead in the water. And down here, and this big dude here is what you're seeing here. Covered, dirt, mud, whatever. He's now calcified. He's now turned to stone. He's petrified. He was covered. He got covered in water, and a lot of water over a short, quick, rapid period of time. And then after the waters receded, what you have left is how the lands have moved and were broken up. But then the islands that are there now, not all islands, obviously, like the volcanoes. I'm not talking about a volcano island. Not all giant islands and mountains are giant people or beings or whatever. The point is that what I'm saying is that this island, though to you and me, it looks like it's part of the earth and we could probably build a house on it. It's not actually fixed to the earth. It's just sitting on top of it. And it's just sitting on top of it, and it's just, yeah. Let me go back. What I'm trying to say here is that you've got your foundation, and then you've got some land, then you got your land on top of the foundation. This land is just, this mountain here is not, it's just on top of the earth. It's on top of it. It's just a layer. And if you add more dirt, you'd have another layer. More dirt, you'd have another layer. More dirt, and you have another layer. Eventually, you have a huge mountain. That's what you would have. But the point is that I don't think that just because it says the islands were moved out of their places, that all the lands shifted around like we are taught about Pangea. These lands aren't shifting, like moving around. Like right here, this is north and south. Oh, shoot. The heck? What I'm trying to tell you is that there's no scenario where these lands end up over here. They're not going to move, right? They're not going to shift around. Not now, not 1,000 years from now, not 1,000,000 years from now. These lands are here because they're fixed. They're immovable. They're in a fixed position. Everything is where it's always been. The only thing that's not where it's always been are these little bitty islands. These little bitty islands that are scattered all over the world. The little bitty islands, they're all over. All these little islands, that's what's moved. That's what it's telling you moved. But these islands are not part of the main lands. They're not part of the main bodies of land. These main bodies of land are fixed upon pillars, upon a fixed, immovable foundation. You have to assume that that is true in order for any of the Bible to make any sense, for any of this timeline stuff to make any sense, for any of these mapping of any of these bloodlines or anything makes any sense. You have to assume that. The reason you have to assume that, and I say assume because, we weren't there, we don't know. I say assume because God himself said that. God says that the earth is set upon pillars, a foundation fixed and immovable. It cannot be moved. You can shake it. You cannot move it. It's not, the lands are not going to slide around and move. You're not going to have America here today and now it's way over here 10,000 miles west. It's done slid around. Some future Jetsons generation is going to have America on a totally different area of the world. It's not going to ever, that is never going to be the case. These lands did not shift around. The reason we have separated continents has nothing to do with continental drifting. That is a educational stereotype. That's an educational thing. That's something your schools taught you. But the lands themselves, there is no such thing as continental drifting. The land is fixed. It's always been fixed. It's always been where it's at. You can destroy the land, take away from it, but you cannot, it's not going to slide around and move. But the reason that we have separated continents, it's not from continental drifting, it's from the fountains of the deep. And you can't see them in this image, but you can see them here. That's a fountain. That is a fountain. In fact, this is where we're at. These little fountains all over. The little craters. There's 200 of them, by the way. NASA tells you there's 198 of these. But there's 200 of them. If you want to go on, if you want to go through here and circle all of them, you would circle 200 of these. And there's 200 fountains. All of them are under the water. You can't see them unless you go under the ocean, go, diving and stuff. But that's where they're at. And then those fountains are what has led to what our continent shapes today. Continental drifting, you didn't hear that in the Bible. No one read that. You didn't pick up your Bible and go, oh, continental drifting. It makes sense. Let's go with that. No one does that. You got continental drifting. That entire concept comes from school. The same school that taught you that the earth was formed from chaotic random nothingness. The same school that taught you came from monkeys. The same school that taught you that there is no God. That's where you get that from. Continental drifting does not come from the Bible. It's what I keep trying to point out about the problem with the little season and people trying to break it down and understand it. There's nothing about the truth that comes from anything in schools. There will be pieces of it, sure. but you will not get the truth from schools. If it's just like the flat earth. It's like when you try to tell someone the earth is flat and they want to argue with you and say, well, what about this? What about that? Well, what about this? What about that? It's kind of like if we're sitting here talking about race cars and then you hit me with, well, what about apple trees in the Middle East? What does apple trees in the Middle East have to do with racing cars? Nothing. So why are you even bringing that up? If we're talking about cars, don't bring in topics that have nothing to do with cars. But that's what it is with the flat earth and the round earth. A round earth, a round ball earth, you cannot use anything that comes with that when trying to explain the flat earth. The physics don't work. The history of it ain't even the same. It's all completely different. It's two totally different concepts. It's two different realities. It's the same way with the Bible. It's the same way with Jesus. It's the same way with these continents. It's the same way with the earth. It's the same way with the maps. Who told you that? That's my question. Every time someone tells me something that I know they didn't read that in the Bible and say, this is the answer, my question is always, who told you that? Who told you that? Think about what I'm saying for a second. Who told you that? Why are you thinking in terms of what everyone else told you if what everyone else is telling you, they don't even believe in the same things you believe? So there's no sense in that. Continental drifting is a concept that only come about after the heliocentric model. After the globe Earth was introduced, that's when they started saying, oh, well, the lands are sitting on tectonic plates and they're all shifting around. America used to be over here attached to Africa because they want you to think you come from Africa. They have, right now, the African American community they're like hardcore on this idea that they come from Africa just because of the Egyptians. Just the same as there's this idea that white people or the Caucasians or the Europeans come from Europe. Why? That's not in the Bible. Where did you get that? Where did you get all of this from? All those ideas of origin of all of that comes from everywhere else besides the Bible. But when we look at the Bible, if we're trying to find the truth, we have to rely on the Bible. Kind of like we have to rely on the Bible when it tells us what a place looks like. For example, it tells us not what the Mississippi is. It doesn't mention Mississippi River, but it does mention the Nile. And then it mentions the Nile as having 7 tributaries. And then we know that the Mississippi is the only river in the world with 7 tributaries. The Nile over in Africa only has 4 tributaries. So if I was trying to figure out where these places were, I can't do it in truth if I'm looking outside the Bible for all these other answers, And I'm not fussing, by the way. I love Jason Jack. I'm not fussing at Jason Jack. It's not a pick. I'm not picking on Jason Jack. I love Jason Jack. But I know that a lot of people don't like to speak the way I do when it comes to this stuff. But I'm going to say what I believe is the truth. And I believe in truth that there is no such thing as continental drifting. Like, these land masses aren't moving over the water and sliding around across, levels and levels of magma and lava. That's not happening. But I do believe, though, that some of these lands did move. Some islands Yeah. Like some of these islands moved, which makes sense to me that some of them would have moved because, why would there be random groups of people living out on these random islands, leaving behind old random artifacts and stuff like that? Like, why even go out there? What's the point? And, thousands of years go by, there's no telling what all reasons people had to travel and to move. The point is that the islands is all it says in the New Testament. It doesn't say the lands, it just says islands. The lands themselves get broken up during the flood, and we see that in Genesis whenever that happens. Let's see. Where is it? It says, and the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased and bare up the ark, and it was lift up above the earth, and the waters prevailed and increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went upon the face of the waters, and the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered, and 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered, and all flesh died upon the mountain. That was upon the earth. In the nostrils, and every living thing was, every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle and creeping thing and fowl. Only Noah remained. Only Noah. Where does it say fountains, right? Here, we'll just do it this way. That's what I thought. In the 600th year Noah's life, the second month, the 17th day of that month, the same day, were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were open. And that's another thing too. That's another thing we got to point out. We got to clarify. What are the windows of heaven? Like, what is he even talking about? Well, we have the land. We got the land. We got the firmament. Got the fountains of the deep breaking up. But the windows of heaven is this. The whole earth flooded. And the waters came from above. They have to come through the firmament. So the firmament had to be broken up. Have you guys, I know you guys have seen that. When you see this image right here, they tell you this is the Milky Way. Our understanding of this comes from schools, comes from scientists, NASA, and everybody else that wants to deceive us. But if we're looking up and we're looking for answers, we're starting in the Bible, in Genesis. The first time it mentions what's above us, it tells us that there's stars, a firmament, and all that above us. But then when we get to chapter 7, verse 11, it tells us that the windows of heaven broken up. What I see is a scar in the firmament, like where it was broken up. and then the waters came from above and from below. It's how the whole almost every part of this earth was flooded. All right, let's see. Like this. If you had the mountains at the mountain, then we got the ark. There's the ark. And so essentially that's what was going on, but all this water was being held in by this firmament, the firmament, the dome firmament that's over us. Where'd all that water go afterwards, though? That's the crazy thing is. But here's what's wild. I don't think our firmament is just this area right here. I think the firmament is way out here. It's way bigger than it's probably even further out than what you can see on this image right there. It could be. I even looked at it and thought it could be something like this. Let me erase all this. It could be like that. And then our world and where we're at is this one little area right here. And there could be several worlds all like within our dome. All I'm trying to say is that this part here of the firmament is hard, but this part here is not. What's directly above us is not a hard substance like the firmament. What I'm trying to say is that I think we live in a bubble within a bubble, but this bubble here is not the firmament. This is the firmament. This is water. This is water. It's made of water, whatever this is, but it freezes into ice. And then you've got the firmament that's way out here. So because it's so high up, this freezes, but it's still bigger. Like we still fly airplanes and stuff in there, and helicopters. Well, like we could still fly around in here, and obviously we live here, right? But all I'm trying to say is that the earth itself is way bigger than we've been taught and than what we've been told. But I'm not trying to shame anybody. I'm not trying to pick on anybody. I know that a lot of people are trying to make sense of why the lands are shaped the way they are, why it looks like they fit, like they were together at one point. Well, they look that way because of the maps that have been drawn of them that way. But when you look at this moon map, even our lands that we know of, they don't look like they were all together. They just look like they're broken up. Like this is just all pieces. It's the scattered remains of what once was a perfect world. This is also why I know, or at least I believe, we're definitely not past the Bible. We're definitely not past the little season, because when Jesus returns and God comes with them to be on earth with man, he takes the old world, rolls it up and gets rid of it, rebuilds a new one. If I am right, that this was the way the world, if the world used to look like this, if this was the world at one point, like I'm saying, and now it's this, this is not the world that God intended to have fellowship with Adam on. This is the world that God made for him and Adam to have fellowship with each other. God created Adam to have someone like him. And that's why he created this, why he made the earth for Adam and for us. Well, if this was the original design, the intent behind the earth that he wanted Adam to live on for all eternity, why would we inherit a piece of, like a shattered world, like the remains of a destroyed world? If the goal is to get us through this time period to the next point in time where we're all righteous and living forever, reigning on earth with Jesus, then why like, there's no part of me, and there's no part of the scripture that makes me think that God cares to hold on to the rest of this world and for us to just go out here and take over. Like, it's not like all the elite are going to leave one day, die, whatever, and then you're just going to go take over all the banks. And now you're the bank owners and you're the business owners. Like, there's no scenario where the world that we live in today just keeps going, and mankind just keeps building on it and just keeps deceiving each other, keeps having wars, keeps doing all the things that we're doing. That doesn't happen. What happens is the world ends. Well, actually, I'm not going to go back to that. The world ends, and when it does, God rolls it up. I think it's in Revelation 9, but he rolls, the earth is rolled up like a scroll and cast into the lake of fire. And then he rebuilds a new one. And when we rebuild the new earth, that's when all of us go into that new world where God is with us. Not just Jesus, but God the Father is with us for all time at that point. And it's going to be in a new world that's brand new, like this one, that doesn't have where we have to worry about continents and all that other mess. Like, we don't have to wonder and worry. Everything's going to be here, and I think we're going to get to see what God intended for us to see when he made Adam and Eve for the first time. And so I think that's what I'm looking forward to anyways. At least to me, that makes way more sense than continental drifting. It makes more sense than Jesus never come back. It just doesn't make any sense, the histories and the lies that they've taught us and told us. But yeah, so what I'm trying to explain and trying to get y'all to see, and I'm not saying that what I'm saying is the absolute truth, right? Because I could be wrong, I could be wrong. But all I'm trying to say is that I don't think that there's actual continental drifting. I know people don't want to look at this map right here because it came from the Vibes of the Cosmos on YouTube, or it come from Rev on Truth Unfiltered. Well, if I were a foul-mouthed person, I'd say to F with you on that, because I didn't create this map. I didn't design this map. This map has been around for over 200 years. I think the earliest one I found was 1860, which is actually I might even have that saved in my bookmarks. Let's see. Let's see. Six zero. I am. All right. Yep. Just so y'all know, I'm not BSing you here. This is the moon map from 1647. So, correction, almost over 400 years. The moon map is older than any of these other maps you guys are using, is all I'm trying to point out. Like, and I say you guys, I'm talking to all, this is specifically and directly to all of the Little Season content creators and all of them. The moon map is older than all of your other maps. It's older than all of them. This is just the oldest one that I could find real quick, pulling up in a quick Google search. But all I'm trying to say is that the moon map was not invented by the Rev in Truth Unfiltered. The moon map was not invented by the vibes of the cosmos. The moon map was invented by God. It was the mirror of the earth given to us by God. It's the reflection of the earth so that we could see the world that we live in. We know where we're at when we look at the moon. It's how they track time and places and stuff like that. But all I'm trying to point out is like this map here, it says this one was from 1647. This is a map of the world, a moon map made of the world. Yeah, a 17th century map by the founder of lunar topography. Johannes followed his father's footsteps as a brewer, while also acting as a counselor and the mayor of his hometown. Indulging his interest in astronomy, learned under the tutelage of the astronomer Peter Kruger. In 1641, he built an observatory on the roof of his house called Sternberg Star Castle. He ground his own lenses and built telescopes for it, including one 46mm, 150-foot long Keplerian telescope with a wood and wire tube. Okay, great. Nobody really even cares. What I'm trying to point out is that the moon map is the oldest accurate map of the world. All other maps are hand-drawn maps that someone has made, and every one of them has an agenda behind that. Just like what I'm doing right now has an agenda. My agenda is to reveal the truth, or to help you understand the truth, even if I don't reveal it, help you to get to it. That's my agenda, right? To try to do what God has instructed us to do, to serve our Maker. But some people don't. Some of these people, whenever they are designing and drawing these maps, what is the agenda? What are they trying to do here? And why is he drawing two of these? Why is there two of them? This is the same map. This isn't two different maps, by the way. It's the same. It's just one shows more different. It's like they got too much information. They couldn't put it all in one. That's why it looks like that. But see, what year was this one? What year did it say? Tabula. There's a date on here somewhere. Oh yeah, 1708. Yeah, there we go. Like I said, 1708, the moon map. This is a moon map. This is a moon map from 1708. That other one we just looked at was from 1647. Here's another one. It was even in the newspaper. Let's see. What year did NASA tell us we went to the moon? Does anybody know? I did that on purpose. You see that? All right. So 1969, right? That's what Google's telling us. Obviously, that's what the truth. That's what they tell us. That's what they showed us. 1969. This is my newspaper. Oh man, they're not gonna. Where is it? There's a newspaper article from 1969 that came out about the Earth, about the moon. And they were showing the moon map in 1969. I don't know why I'm not able to see it here. Anyways, I thought it was interesting. It's like, whoa, well, that's wild. They got a newspaper. There's a newspaper article. Newspaper article. And then all of a sudden they're talking about the Earth. It's the moon map, the flat Earth type stuff, and then suddenly they're now talking about men on the moon. Men going to the moon. Moon's a rock. It's in outer space. But it just so happens that it was in the same time. It was like the same year that I can't remember who it was. But he was trying to point out the moon map in calling out the government, because it was the president and everybody else was saying that the Earth was round and they were going to space. And then these guys came up and were like, no, we're not. We're not going to space. There's no space. You can't land on the moon. And here's a map of it. And he was showing it, and it was in a newspaper article. I don't know why I'm not able. Obviously, well, there's an obvious reason why I'm not able to find it, right? But what we do see is that, or all of this. Man, where is that? I have it in my saved somewhere. I have saved it. I know I did. I'm going to pull it up. Where am I saved? Well, I can't find it. Doesn't matter. Anyways, I had like I said, there's a newspaper article. Where is it? Maybe we'll find it if we just keep scrolling through here. But what I'm trying to point out is that the moon map is not new. It's been around for a very, very long time. It's been around just as long, if not longer, than any of these other maps. And the thing is, like, why wouldn't you trust it? Like, why wouldn't you want to put faith in something that is natural over something that is unnatural? Like this is unnatural, right? I drew this. I didn't draw this, but this is an image. This is a cartoon image. This isn't a real photograph, but it's a cartoon image of the real moon and the lands that are portrayed on the moon. But this is not, it's not a fairy tale map. It's not a fantasy map. It's not this. This is not what you're seeing when you look at the moon. You don't see this. The lands don't look like this. They kind of do a little, right? A little bit. They kind of look like this. When you look at these lands, they kind of do look like this, even on the moon. But their scale is so off. The placement of them is so off. None of it makes any sense. Like, you're not going to fit any of this into the Bible. Like, none of this fits in the Bible. It just doesn't fit. You gotta get rid of that. This fits in the Bible, though. This definitely fits. The moon map does. And why did I get bigger? Pull that back up. Boom. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. pull that back up. And we are, yep. All right. So there's that. So yeah, okay. Now back to here. Now, what I'm going to show you right here, and this is going to be a little difficult to see, I already know. In the timeline of us, the History of Us series that I'm doing, you're going to have to follow me as we go through that timeline, when we follow these people, the sons of Noah after the flood. We're going to follow them. Where did they go and how did they get there? Well, it's my understanding that they start out in this region right in here. And if we go west and north and then south, we end up here. We go, this is the line of Ham. The line of Ham goes up the west coast, around this way, down into Asia, China, India, boom. And he ends up over here in Egypt. This is where Ham ends up, okay? But he starts out right here on the west coast of the Americas. Japheth is why you'll have a lot of Viking artifacts and a lot of Viking stuff in the east coast, like up around Maine and Rhode Island and that area, that region. Well, they start here and they go to the east coast and then they follow it. And then they go around the Great Circle into Siberia, into Russia, and then they land, and then they end up over here. So they end up right there. This is Japheth's line. This is where Ham's line. But then you have Sham's line still over here. Actually, still over here. Well, this doesn't make any sense with all this scribble scrabble on here, so let me get rid of that. But what I'm going to show you is that when we follow the people from the Bible, they do scatter out from this point. But they don't start here. I mean, they start here. They don't start in Africa and in Europe and then go out into the rest of the world. They started in the Americas right after the flood. The first 250 years, they traveled and then reclaimed all what was left of the old world. So they reclaimed it. They claimed their lands. Boom, 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 like that. They claimed so those two sons, Ham and Japheth, they go out into the world to reclaim the world. They leave their old home of Canaan right here. There's Canaan. They leave the old Canaan behind. 400 years after they're in Egypt, the Israelites and in Egypt, they end up coming back home. That's where they go. That was the land of promise. It's where they originated from. So they go back home. So the Israelites follow Ham only because they're trying to avoid Japheth. So if we're trying to really follow the people in the Bible, you got Israel right here when he's born, Israel and Esau. Esau goes over here. He kind of mingles in and mixes with the line of Ham, and then eventually he goes over here and settles in Europe. So he goes over here and settles in Europe. This is Japheth, right? Japheth is over here in Europe. Esau goes over there to Europe. While Esau is going to the east, northward that way, Israel is trying to get away from his brother, and he goes to Haran. Well, he leaves from there and goes this way, and then eventually ends up in Haran, which is somewhere over in this region. He's trying to stay away from his brother, and his brother thinks that he's, has to travel around the world to get to him. Well, after Israel ends up in Haran, next thing you know, he ends up in Egypt. Well, when we're reading the Bible in Egypt, let me go back. Let me get rid of some of this stuff. When we're over here in Egypt, you've got from Egypt is the Aegean Sea, which is where Greece is, and this is where they kept attacking. They kept attacking Egypt, like the Europeans from Greece kept attacking Egypt, but they could never take on Egypt until the Israelites leave. Once the Israelites leave out of Egypt, for 40 years they wander. For 40 years they wander, and then they end up back here, home, where they started. Then a few years later, they get carried away, back away as slaves into Babylon. So now they get brought back into Babylon. Well, once they get brought into Babylon, 14 generations go by, they come back to the Americas, or to Israel, or to the Promised Land, whatever you want to call it. So now, when Jesus comes around, they're now back over here. Well, whenever Paul is writing these letters and all the apostles are going out and spreading the word and talking to people, this is what they're talking about. They're spreading the word like this. It's from this point, from where we're at in the Americas, out. It's not from everywhere else to America. It's from America out. The homeland, so to speak, would be the Americas, if in that way. And so from here, what ends up happening is once Jesus gets here, then they spread out, and that's where you start seeing all of the maps. Like when you're watching Leaving Babylon, all of her maps, a lot of her maps will show it looks like the Israelites are starting here and then ending up in America. But if you reverse it, it's the other way around. They're in America and then they end up in these other places. So it's where it was the path of the 12 tribes, the 144,000, as they spread out and went out into the world. They started out here in the smallest piece of land on earth, America, the little bitty island of America, if you want to call it that, Turtle Island. They started here, the smallest place, and then they spread out like that. And that's where the 12, you can start following the 12 tribes through the 1,000 year reign, and through a lot of the older maps in that way. And it's why you'll see like the names of like Hebrew names all over the world. Like they're not just in America. I mean, they're everywhere. They went everywhere. But they spread out from America. So if we were looking at, actually, let me pull up this. What I'm saying is that if you're looking at the globe, like if you wanted to use the maps that you recognize today, the East Coast right here, the West Coast, this is Ham, all the way here from North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, all the way west. So like all of that west. And then Ham's line, or Egypt, is going to settle around this region right here, right after the flood. So like the first 3 generations, not all the generations, but the very first 3 generations before Egypt was born, they end up right here. All right. They end up in this region, and then they move. They traveled. They come up this way. They hit Alaska. Then they hit Russia. Now that they're in Russia, They keep going, and then they end up over in Asia, and here we are, China, Thailand, Bangladesh, India. They're moving, they're traveling. All of this was not burned up, by the way. There might have been deserts in the world, but the whole world, like, it wasn't all burned up like this. Then they just keep going. He just keeps going, and then boom, he ends up over here. So Egypt, from the line of Ham, he ends up here. But at one point, he had to start somewhere, and they started right here. The same, I'm going to show you, this is where Japheth does. It's also why if you go up the east coast of America, it's very similar to Europe, by the way, like climate-wise. But this is Japheth's line. They end up moving up this way. They get into Quebec. They go up around this. They stay in. They're still in Canada, while Ham is over here on one side of Alaska. They're over here on the other side. They end up going around this. I think that so there's two ways that they could have done this, right? They could have started about right in here, and they could have continued to walk and made their way around, right? But it's also possible, because we know the Phoenicians come from them, that when they got to here, that they simply built ships or little boats and then sailed from there to Iceland, and then from there over to Sweden, Norway, and then into the United Kingdom, and then Ireland and Britain and all of that, where all that is. So what I'm saying is, like, how they got here is irrelevant so much as to know that this is where they ended up. So what I'm trying to say is, like, from America, the Europeans started in America before they ended up in Europe. The Table of Nations is what becomes France, Poland, Germany, the UK, Portugal, Spain. Like, all of that becomes from the Table of Nations. Like, all of those, that's from the line of Japheth. This is where how these countries get established, right in here, is through the line of Japheth. But as you can see, using this is Greece right here, right? Greece is where Macedonia was. It's also where Alexander the Great was from, right? Well, Alexander the Great was from his father Philip from Chittim, who was just so happens to be Alexander the Great. Boom. Alexandria right here. Here's another point to that. The Bible tells us, well, not just the Bible, but even like you go. So if we're looking at the 12 patriarchs, and I know JT's on, so we might be losing some folks here soon, but and I'm going to be wrapping up here real shortly. I want to watch his mixtape anyways. Point is that I was trying to make is that when you read the Testament of Judah, he talks about how the Greeks kept coming across the Aegean Sea to attack Egypt, and that he kept basically stopping them. You know, every time they would come in, he would basically shut them down and send them back across the Aegean Sea. Well, right across the Aegean Sea from Egypt is Greece. It's depending on how north, what part of north you're going. So here we got Alexandria, Egypt, and then what's right north of Egypt is Greece. Now, interesting thing is, once the Israelites leave Egypt and start traveling away from Egypt, only then can Alexander the Great conquer Egypt. But they could not conquer Egypt until the Israelites were gone, right? It's the same reason why none of these countries, let me pull this back up. It's the reason why none of these countries right here that you see will ever be able to take take out or take on America. It's not because we're Americans and we're the best. We the best. It's not it. It's not because we're the greatest nation on earth. That has nothing to do with it either. It has to do with the promise God made to his people. And God made a promise to the Israelites, or to Jacob, that no nation would stand against them. That any nation that stood against Israel would fall sevenfold or something like that. To quote it correctly, we have to look it up. But it's basically what I'm trying to point out is that the reason that Egypt was unable to be taken over at any time during the Bible times before David was because of the Israelites being in Egypt. Where's my chat? Oh, there it is. Yep. Anyhow, all right. So what I'm getting at, and what I'm trying to show you guys is that, and we've been showing you, been going over, is the timeline. Not only a timeline, a fixed timeline, a biblically accurate timeline with biblically accurate geography. Like, who are we? Where are we? How did we get here? When did we get here? All of that, all the above questions. And so the History of Us series that I'm trying to produce, the first 3 episodes, like I said earlier, were basically kind of like a remembrance, like a reflection. I want you to kind of be able to reflect on the days of Noah, so that you could formulate it in your mind, the atmosphere, the gravity, and the seriousness of the fall of man. So that when we get to the flood and the days right after the flood, it'll help you put yourself in their shoes properly. Because how would you behave? You wouldn't. You can't. You would behave a different way than they would. You wouldn't behave the way that they would, because everything up to that point is so very different than anything you and I have experienced or would experience. And so, like I said, yeah. We're talking about 2 different things there, Brother Caleb. We're not talking about the same thing. And also, I'm not referring to the modern state of Israel or those people either. And what I'm saying is that it's like, yeah, it doesn't say, just because the Bible says that. All right, for example, if I said, if you attack me, Caleb, it's going to be 10 times worse on you. If just because you didn't attack me doesn't mean that it would never be worse on you, right? But like, if you did attack me, it doesn't mean that you can't attack me. It doesn't mean that you can't enslave me. It doesn't mean that you can't hurt me. Just because you will be punished 7-fold for messing with me doesn't mean that it's all going to happen all at once, like immediately, boom. Like, you pushed me down and now you're dealing with 7 times being pushed down. That is silly, and that is a childish mindset. And so, hopefully we can move past that. But no, that's not what I'm saying. But yeah, it is what the Bible says. Anyone that comes against Israel, I think it's 7-fold or 7 times, or maybe I'm thinking of something else. Maybe I'm mixing that up with something else. I could be mixing that up with something else, but it doesn't matter. The point being that Israel, as a people, are protected by God. God is the only way the Israelites could fall to anyone is that. And you're right. I might be mixing that up with something, but it doesn't matter, I don't guess, whether I'm right or wrong on that. What matters is that actually, here, let's see if I can find that. It says, might be mixing that up. Let's see, make sure I say that right. Is it Deuteronomy? Where is the KJV? I think this is what I was talking about. This is probably where I got that. There we go. Can you see that? See what I got on the screen here. So this is where that comes from. What I'm saying, Deuteronomy 28:6-8. Blessed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and blessed shalt thou be when thou goest out. The Lord shall cause thine enemies that rise up against thee to be smitten before thy face. They shall come out against thee one way and flee before thee 7 ways. So it was a misquote. I misquoted that, but that's what I was talking about. This is what I was referring to. The Lord shall command the blessing upon thee in thy storehouses, and in all that thou settest thine hand unto, and he shall bless thee in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Dang, I know how I messed that up though. I'm taking that out of context from something that has nothing to even do with them. I'm considering something to do with Cain. But yeah, the point is that all I'm trying to say is that as out of that, blessed, the Lord shall cause thine enemies to rise. The Lord shall cause thine enemies that rise up against thee to be smitten before thy face. It's the whole understanding that, like, Deuteronomy is what, it comes right after Exodus, right? Yeah. So you have the Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. But it's the context of what we're discussing there is what is going on in the book of Deuteronomy. Like, what's the point of Deuteronomy? Well, Deuteronomy is their suffering, right? It's the 40 years of wandering, where you were mentioning the wars and the battles that they fought and lost and this and that. Well, during that time, you would have there were like those situations where God says go here to go there, and the people are worried because they have to deal with somebody, and then they end up just doing it because they believe in God. As long as you have faith in God, God is in control, so to speak. Essentially, what Deuteronomy was them being in the wilderness, the wandering, and so you would have a lot of fear, Jacob, chill out. You would have a lot of fear of doubt during that wandering, right? And so all that is that's just God's way of like letting the people know, hey, look, chill out. You don't have to stress and worry. I got you. But when you back up into the Exodus, right as they're coming out of Egypt and everything, there's a lot of uncertainty with them. There's a lot of uncertainty with any of them. And so all that was I was just pointing out that Israel, as long as Israel is true to the faith. Now I know what your mind. I think I know what you did. I think I know what you did, Caleb. You probably heard listening to me, and you just assumed that I'm applying all of this to us today, right? Because we're in America, and I'm an American. You're an American. We're the Israel. Like we're. No, it has nothing to do with us. We have nothing to do with any of this, by the way, the Bible peoples. All these people are way past us. We're way beyond, before us. We're way past all these people. But yeah, he did. Actually, he did. And it makes sense too, right? Like I said, like during Deuteronomy, the people were in their state of wandering. So they were confused. They didn't know what was going to happen next. They didn't know what their situation was like. They're confused, right? And so Deuteronomy, God is constantly trying to help them understand that he's actually there to help them if they'll listen. But they're very stubborn. They're very stubborn people. But yeah, it makes sense that Jesus would use Deuteronomy to teach, his message to the people of his day, considering what they were about to have to go through, like considering the tribulation and all the events of tribulation that they had to go through, the uncertainty, the fear, the worry, the concern. Well, Deuteronomy, if you know that the book well enough, the way Jesus would have, you would have used that to try to console the people, and so that they wouldn't necessarily be worrying and stressing out. Yeah. I mean, and like I said, it's just it's quoting this stuff verbatim. That's the thing I don't like doing, and so I appreciate what the mind challenge there, Brother Caleb. But I'm not trying to quote these verses verbatim. I'm not trying to be that guy. It's just an understanding that you get from it. I understand that if America is Israel, like we're saying, and if we in America are Israelites, that don't mean nothing. That doesn't mean anything. Does it change anything? Does it make any of us better than anyone else? It doesn't make any of us chosen people. We're just simply here. We're just simply here, and either we understand the truth, accept it, or we don't. Our fate is the same for everyone. There's no one on earth today that's living with a separate fate than anyone else. We all have the same fate. We all are born, and so we all will die at some point. What happens with us during that time comes down to the choices we make, and that's the point, right? The little season, to hide all the truths from you, so you don't know what choices to make, so that you're always making the wrong choices. We're always leaning on this or leaning on that, but we're never leaning on Scripture. We're never putting God first. And because of that, we end up lost. No. I'm only saying exactly what comes out of my mouth, Brother Caleb. It's when you and people that do what you have done that like to add in things because you're thinking that, you're thinking that that's probably what I'm assuming or what I'm saying. But if you've watched me long enough or been around a while, you'll know that when I say something, that I'm only meaning exactly what I'm saying. But yeah, so no. When I talk about the land of America, as far as like the timeline and the history and all of that, I'm not talking about 1776 America. I'm not talking about George Washington America. I'm not talking about the Civil War of America, that time period. I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about a totally different group of people in a time when they wouldn't have even called this place America necessarily. However, I do believe that it was called Amaru Khan, but I believe that when it was called Amaru Khan, that was during the time of what was Ham's son's name? Was it Ham? Let me pull it back up. So Ham begot Cush, Seba, Mizraim, foot. Yeah, I think it was Mizraim, wasn't it? Right? One of this, or not Mizraim. I'm sorry, Cush, Canaan. Yeah. So when they were given their allotted portions of the earth, their inheritance, Ham was given his portion, But Canaan actually decided to stay in the land of Shem and kind of took over it, which is where the giants, while there were giants in the land whenever they got there, while they were big and stuff. But Ham, yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that when Nimrod was in control of the world, I think that the land that we call America today, they called it Amaru Khan. And yet somebody, I don't remember who his name is, but there's someone he talks about this, and he was pointing out that America used to be called Amaru Khan, but I think that was during the Nimrod period, the Nimrod time period, but it wasn't after that. And so, anyways, but that doesn't really matter. It's neither here nor there. He says, "What do you think they called it if George Washington was even real?" So I really believe that when all right, so you're talking about like little season time period. I guess first of all, we'd have to understand like what was going on in the normal person's brain during that time period. We have a lot to cover to get to this point, so I may leave you with more questions than I give you answers to, Mr. Caleb, but the way I understand it is that right after the millennial reign, when it ended, the amount of people that were here during the millennial kingdom was not the same number of people that was here afterwards, which is why I do think there was a sort of rapture. Not exactly the way we would think of a rapture, but I think that most people left Earth at that point, and that what was left behind were people of patience and desire, people that decided to stay behind so that they could take over, the new, what's left of this world. Well, during that, the average regular person only knows what they've been taught or told, and there wouldn't be very many of those people. You would have select groups and families that I believe were left behind, and in that leaving behind, when they got over here, normal people like us, we would call this America if we were told it was America. But what were the elites or the ones who were in charge at that time calling this place? Well, they were pretending like they didn't even know it existed, right? They had to pretend like they didn't know that this was here in order to build the world that we live in today. You wouldn't have the world we have today if people were always informed, well informed, obviously. But yeah, I think that this has just simply been called America as long as it's just been called America. It's always been America, but prior to Jesus's day, this wasn't America. This was just land. It's just the lands of these people or those people. And yeah, it is interesting how you have all these ancient artifacts, but I could be way off. I could be wrong, and all of us could be wrong without any of this stuff. But it fits. A lot of the stuff makes way more sense, and it fits whenever you consider the moon map. You consider America being the land of promise. If you consider America as most people do, they call it the land of milk and honey or God's country. It's the only place on earth really that's kind of has those labels. More importantly, there's nothing to the east of Israel. Anyways, if everything's upside down, the only thing east of modern day Israel today is water. There is no land east of them necessarily, not like it is if the maps are flipped. like I said, everything's been reversed. Everything's reversed. Your maps are wrong, are being taught to us wrong, or a little bit wrong. They're all off. The maps, I mean, the timelines are all off. They've lied to us about all of that. They've lied to us about our history. They've lied to us about everything. Everything in the world. Everything is a lie. And it has to be. Because none of this stuff that we read in the Bible here, none of this stuff is true or can be true with the histories we get taught in school. Because it don't add up. It don't match. But you can follow these people. Yeah. All right. Yeah. You can follow these people on a regular map, but you just have to understand the time it's going to take you to walk from here to here is not the same as it would take you to walk from here to here. It's, obviously it's two different sizes of places. The United States as a whole is the smallest body of land on earth outside of like islands. But as far as like fixed land masses, it's the smallest body of land. It's the only place on earth that this moon map actually fits, where you have Israel being one of the smallest little places. Like if I'm right about that, and this is Israel, it's the smallest body of land. It's a small little bitty place. Well, if you were Nimrod and you had control over all of this land, all of this was yours, a group of people in little bitty America or Israel, wherever, aren't your concern. Like, you're not worried about them. It's like you wouldn't be worried about them. You're not, but they're never building up. They don't ever have time. The first time they build up is when they get to Solomon, right? King Solomon, when he builds his temple, from David to Solomon, he builds his temple, and then after that temple is destroyed, they're gone for about almost 3,000 years. In what I'm like, for several generations, it's 28 generations to be exact. And then in that 28, yeah, it's 2,300 years passes by. Yeah, not 3,000, 2,000. A little over 2,000 years passes by, and they end up coming back to the Americas, where they rebuild the second temple. And then we get Jesus. It also makes sense to me why people in Rome would have been less likely to accept Jesus, because they weren't actually visually seeing him do the things that they were hearing about, because he's on the other side of the world doing it. Whereas over there, they would have to see it. So it kind of makes sense to me that they would all see Jesus coming in the clouds, and that's how, that's why they were all able to accept him. Unlike today, where we don't see Jesus, we just have to have faith. Caleb says, appreciate the comment. The moon is an interesting thing for sure. Keep studying the scriptures. I believe those who don't believe we're in Revelation 20 after Satan's season release are still our brothers in Jesus. Yeah, I do, actually. In fact, and I'm gonna wrap up with this, but I look at it like this. This is us, right? This represents the world, and the world is a battlefield, and we are a small unit on that battlefield. But then you got other units, like your Charlie Kirk type units, right? Your Christian units, they're brothers in Christ, just like you and me. They don't know about the moon map. They don't know about a flat earth. They don't really even care probably, but they're a lot larger unit than us. There is a lot more of them. And yeah, I feel like they are our brothers and sisters in Christ. Do they have the same understanding that we do, the same knowledge that we do? No, they don't. But I think that they are still brothers and sisters, and they're just simply another unit on the battlefield. But if you could see, like on this little diagram I'm making here, if this represents every other Christian that is our brothers and sisters, you got to understand that they see themselves as superior to you and me, because there's only a few of us and there's a lot of them. And so the reason why we have pushback in our community with other Christians like Sean from Kingdom in Context is because he's a part of a large group of Christians. And so we're a little bitty group. And so he feels superior already just by the natural course of belonging. And so he feels that superiority. But also, if you and I get in his way, he gonna step on us and he gonna crush us because he's a part of that large group. So it's why it's not important for you and me as people who believe in the little season to kind of go to these folks and fight with them, argue with them. No, the earth is flat. No, it's round. No, it's this. Like, we don't need to do all that. It's not like, that's not important. That's not our mission. That turns us from basically teammates to enemies, so they're not, like I said, we're a small unit. They're a big unit, and we just need to stay out of their way. But now the problem is their unit is shrinking, but our unit is growing, and it's going to keep growing. And our unit's going to grow until it's consumed the whole world. But there's going to be a lot of division and a lot of hate before that happens. And the reason is simple. Satan uses division to tear us down and to hurt us. God is going to use this division to unite us and bring us all together. And while that sounds great, it kind of is great. It's what ultimately leads to this final hoorah, this final battle. It's how we all get united. The modern understanding of Christianity, the modern understanding of history, and modern understanding of politics, those three things, religion, politics, and history, those are three elements. If any one of them is present, you'll never have unity in thought among all people. You have to get rid of all three of those metrics. You have to get rid of history, which is your education. You have to get rid of religion, which is your false doctrines. What was the other? History, religion, and the other. And you have to get rid of all of it. But then, in order to have the truth, though, you get rid of all that and you replace it with what Scripture tells you. And then you'll have the truth. But yeah, that's the problem with the modern stuff. They can't. You can't have the truth with all of that, really. You got to erase all of that. But you're never going to have a unity of thought like that. The little season, what it's going to do, I feel like, is it's going to make every person accept the same Jesus. Whether you believe the earth is flat or not, you're still going to understand when in time you are. And they're still going to understand that Jesus did die, resurrect, leave, and come back and do what he said he was going to do. People will all agree to that at some point, but there will be differences in how and why we agree to that, right? And that's where the delusion of deception comes in when it comes down to us fighting this final battle of God and Magog. I think the very opposite of what we think would happen is what happens. Like I said, if most people would assume that if everyone wakes up to the same truth, that there would just be peace. But I think that creates more problems. But problems that end up leading to a positive outcome or a finite solution of, peace and prosperity. In other words, out of the fire, something good will come out of it. That's how that works. But anyways, that's pretty much all I have for you guys this evening. I know I kind of carried on a little bit longer than I was originally planning on. 3.5 hours. Dang, I didn't realize I was going that long. But yeah, so we covered a good bit. We went over the timeline accurately all the way up to King David. So that shows you guys, okay, we went over that, and we went over how you take the sum of those generations, divide it by 14 to give you the exact number of how long someone lives. And I did mess up on that, but because I left out a couple pages on my presentation there. But what the pages that I was going to show how whether you go off of 40 or 70 year generations, you're either going to come up with 5.5 or 5,500 years, or you're going to have 6,000 years. It's either one. It's one of either or. But either way, you would still add 1,000 years to it. And if you added 1,000 years to it, you're either going to be right at 6,500 years, or you're going to be right at 6,000 years. So there's a 500-year gap. But that gap was a thing that Satan used. It was an idea that Satan stole from God, I believe. What I mean is that if when you read through books of Enoch and Jasher, Jubilees, we find out that God really was going to destroy the earth with a flood roughly 500 years before he ever even did it. But he held off a whole nother 500 years just to give those guys plenty of time to repent. And yet they never did. And so because God extended a real day by a half day, 500 years, I think that's where they get the adding of time of 500 years to our timeline. I don't think they've added thousands of years or anything like that. I think simply what they did is they just simply added 500 years to the end of the 1,000 years. And it doesn't have to be an exact 500. In fact, I think it was around like 512 years is what they actually added. But it's somewhere around that. But the point is that all that tells us is that the time we live in, the little season, as far as the genealogy of things goes, is that we are right here near the end. Like we know that it's been less than 1,000 years since Jesus returned and reigned on earth. It's been less than 1,000, but we also know that he reigns for 1,000. So there's no reason to assume that we would have any time equal to his time, that we would have way less time. And that only makes sense, that we would have way less time. If all that's true, all that means is that Jesus comes back in the next 15 to 25 years, give or take, somewhere around that. Whether he comes back in our lifetime or not, it doesn't matter, because the little season doesn't have a fixed amount of time. There is no this many generations of the little season. It just doesn't do that. It doesn't happen like that. There's no such thing as that. But there is a time of the little season, and that time is going to last as long as it needs to. It's till we're all deceived. We are all deceived right now. I believe. I don't know. There might be one or two people in the world that know everything, but there are a lot of people that don't. And what I mean by that is that by the people that might know a lot is like, consider the secret societies and secret families, right? Let's say they have information. There's someone in that family that has the knowledge and knows everything that there is to know, potentially. But not everyone in that family knows everything for obvious reasons. So if you consider that, though, everyone is limited in time. They got to die at some point. So if the oldest people of those families are around today, they're all in their late years in life, 80s, 90s, 100 years old or so. I think once the oldest people of these families pass on, that's when all this comes to fruition, because it'll be the youth that don't remember. Your elders, the older people, we always remember the last, our lives in the last however many years. But the people of the future, like the next generations, your great grandkids, they're not even gonna care about JFK. That has nothing to do with them. That was 200 years. Just like today, nobody really cares about Abraham Lincoln or who killed him. I mean, they kind of haven't already just accepted it was John Wilkes Booth, even if it ain't true. You just accept it and move on because, well, it was so long ago, it doesn't matter. You can't do nothing about it now anyways, right? It's just how things work. Over time, generations forget. But I don't think that happens with us. I think we're the last generation to be deceived. And after us, the next generations that come up, they won't be deceived the way that we are or were. That's why I don't think we have much time left. I really don't. Totally awesome show, Rev. Love you, man. Love you too, Brother Barry. Love you too. Brother Donut, glad to see you made it. Glad to see you made it. And you're right, he does lose. But until that day, stay armored up. Absolutely. Look, you guys are an amazing audience. I had a lot I wanted to go over and cover this evening when it comes to this timeline stuff. But if you guys enjoyed this, you haven't liked or subscribed, please do that. Hit that bell notification, because I will be trying to come back later on this week. After tomorrow, some things are going to be changing around here. I will be I'll be adding a new member to the Rev household down here, and so hopefully all that'll go pretty smooth and pretty well. I'm also going to move my setup, like my station, like where I got it at right now. I'm going to move it to a different room. But I will try to come back on Thursday. I'm going to try to pick back up with my my normal Bible studies and stuff and what I've been doing, and pick right back up where we left off and keep moving forward. I'm going to keep on plugging along with this timeline stuff and kind of, try to show you guys, present to you guys as much stuff as I can. But yeah, we're going to be changing some stuff up around here at the Rev's place. And so I'm excited to see where this new direction is taking me. Like, you guys are an amazing audience. I have missed y'all. I really have. I know there's a lot of people that are my normal chatters in my chat community that aren't here yet, weren't here today. But I'm also haven't been, consistent either. So once I get back into my consistency with posting and going live and doing my live streams, we'll get our our normal crowd should come back. For those that are missing the ones that I miss, I miss hanging out and seeing everybody. I know Miss Trish was busy. I see she was busy, and they were working in the garden earlier. But also, I'm 44 minutes into JC's live stream, so I'm gonna shut this down for the evening, and I'm gonna swap over and catch up with him and see what they're talking about. With that being said, I love you guys. You guys have been an amazing audience. Thank you guys for being here. God bless each and every one of you. Prayers up for those who need it, and for those who, if you just need anybody to talk to or to vent or anything like that, you just need fellowship. there's always chat on YouTube, but then there's also the Discord. And I know I haven't been as active in it lately. I've been tied up with a bunch of other stuff, but yeah, there's always that. So hit us up on the Discord if y'all want to, if you ever feel like just talking, or if you guys got anything you ever just want to get off your chest or just discuss in general. Just have a normal conversation or fellowship in general. Come to the Discord, hang out with us there. The Discord does stay pretty active. Every day I notice that people are in there talking about stuff and carrying on. So it's a nice little place. And so it's good. It's good that we're building fellowship in this season. It's tough times. That said, you guys are an amazing audience. Thank you guys for being here. I love each and every one of you. I do plan to come back on Thursday night, but the next few days is going to determine that. But definitely I'll be back next week, if not this weekend. So for sure, I will definitely be back, and we will get right back on schedule with our normal scheduled programming. And yeah, we'll just keep moving forward. You guys are awesome. Thanks for being here. I love you guys. Take care, and God bless.
Wake up the truth inside. Let the light cut through the lies. This is where we rise. No filter, no fear, only faith. The morning breaks on a brand new day. The storm still rages, but we're not afraid. We've seen the dark, we felt the pain, but the light of truth still breaks the chains. Breaks the chains, lights the way. They said stay silent, but the truth spoke louder. 'Cause faith don't fade when the storm begins. It grows stronger in the wind. Faith will stay.